The sharp smell of industrial bleach stung the back of Akshay's throat, struggling to cover the sour odor of old sweat. He squeezed the worn mop head, his right kneecap answering with a hollow, wet click. Across the spotless tatami mats, two tech billionaires in crisp canvas uniforms bounced lightly, searching for a human target. Industrial bleach never truly erased the smell of stale sweat. It only settled over it, creating a harsh chemical scent that burned the back of the throat. Akshay pushed the heavy cotton mop around the edge of the main training mat, watching the dirty gray water collect and trail behind him. His right knee clicked with every stroke, a dull, steady rhythm that matched his movements. Pop, drag, ring. Pop, drag, ring. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. The fluorescent lights overhead at Apex Martial Arts buzzed constantly, a mosquito-like hum drilling into his skull. Apex wasn't really a gym. It was a luxury training center built for Seattle's wealthiest residents. People didn't come there to learn survival. They came to purchase the feeling of danger. They wore custom-fitted GIs that smelled of fabric softener and eucalyptus. Akshay's work uniform was nothing more than faded cargo pants and a gray t-shirt stained with bleach near the hem. He was only 38 years old, yet his body felt closer to 60. He paused, leaning heavily against the wooden mop handle while pressing a palm into the aching muscles of his lower back. 7 hours of maintenance work were already behind him, with 3 more still ahead. Across the room, the Grant twins were putting on another performance. Dillian and Damien. Akshay knew their names because they appeared on the building's lease, in regional tech magazines, and even in the irritating pop-up ads that filled his phone. They were 32, unbelievably wealthy, and looked almost identical. Sharp jawlines, dark hair slicked back with expensive pomade, and the restless confidence of men who had never been told no. Together, they owned a logistics software empire. Tonight, they wore midnight black GIs with perfectly tied black belts wrapped around their waists. "I'm telling you, your hip rotation was late," Dillian snapped, his voice echoing across the mirrored walls. He whipped a fast roundhouse kick into the heavy bag. Smack. The sound was crisp and impressive, yet the bag barely moved. "You're planting your lead foot too early," Damien replied, stepping in with a spinning hook kick. Thud. The impact carried more weight. Akshay watched them with the detached expression of a man staring at a television with the volume muted. They were quick. Their technique had been polished by expensive private coaching, but they lacked real weight behind their strikes. They hit like men who knew they were protected by padded gloves, standing on padded floors, while an instructor waited nearby to stop anything uncomfortable. He looked away, focusing instead on a stubborn black scuff across the vinyl flooring. His thoughts drifted to the cramped kitchen in his apartment, more specifically, to the envelope sitting beside the salt shaker. Final notice. He needed $800 by Friday. His checking account held exactly $42, and his young daughter was asleep on a second-hand mattress after outgrowing her winter coat 3 months earlier. "Hey, maintenance." Akshay didn't answer right away. He calmly finished scrubbing away the mark, his rough, calloused fingers moving slowly before he straightened up. His knee popped once again. Dillian stood at the edge of the mat with his hands resting on his hips. The scent of expensive sandalwood cologne drifted toward Akshay, clashing harshly with the bleach rising from the mop bucket. "We need a body," Dillian said. It wasn't phrased as a request. Akshay blinked, his tired face showing little emotion. "I still have to finish the north section. The manager wants these floors dry by 10. Damien joined his brother, wiping sweat from his forehead with a spotless white towel. "Our private coach canceled. Food poisoning. We've got a tournament on Saturday, and we need a live target to practice distance management." His eyes traveled over Akshay's worn shirt and exhausted posture. "You're a big guy. Throw on some headgear. We just need someone who moves instead of a heavy bag." "I clean these floors," Akshay replied, his voice rough as stone scraping against stone. "I don't bleed on them." Dillian let out an impatient sigh, the sound of someone accustomed to solving every inconvenience with money. He walked to his sleek leather gym bag, a duffel worth more than Akshay's old car. Unzipping a side pocket, he removed a money clip and peeled away several crisp bills. $300, Dillian offered, holding the cash out. 30 minutes, light contact. You just stand there, keep your guard up, and let us work our angles. We won't hurt you. Akshay stared silently at the money. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the bills almost looked fake. $300 wouldn't pay the rent, but it would buy groceries and a warm winter coat for Chloe. A familiar knot twisted deep inside his stomach. It was the same feeling he'd experienced while waiting in line at the VA, asking landlords for another extension, or choosing dented cans of soup because they were cheaper. He looked back at the twins. They bounced lightly on the balls of their feet, practically buzzing with restless energy. To them, he was nothing more than a tired janitor. They never noticed the faded tattoo creeping up his left forearm, the remains of a ranger scroll hidden beneath scar tissue left by shrapnel in Kunar province. "Make it 5, Akshay heard himself say. The brothers exchanged a glance. Damien flashed a broad grin. $500. Deal. Grab a GI from the loaner bin. Akshay rolled his mop bucket against the wall. Its plastic wheels squealed softly. Then he headed toward the locker room, walking with an uneven gait, his right leg dragging ever so slightly behind him. He didn't feel like a retired warrior returning to battle. He felt like an exhausted father, willing to let two wealthy strangers hit him just to buy groceries. Inside the locker room, warm air filled with eucalyptus steam wrapped around him. He found the loaner bin and pulled out a white gi. The heavy canvas felt rough, washed countless times until the fabric had become stiff and abrasive. He removed his shirt. The mirror reflected a body covered in old memories. His left shoulder sat lower than the right. A jagged pink scar crossed his ribs. Dark circles framed tired eyes. He slipped on the GE jacket. It fit tightly across his shoulders. Wrapping the worn white belt around his waist, he tied a simple knot. He didn't bother taping his hands. Instead, he stood quietly, listening to the steady drip of a leaking faucet. "Just 30 minutes, he whispered to himself. "Keep your hands up. Take the hits. Take the money. Go home to Chloe." The tatami mats felt cool beneath Akshay's bare feet, their textured surface gripping his soles. He walked toward the center, feeling strangely exposed. The white GI felt more like a costume than clothing. Dillian and Damien were already waiting, wearing red headgear and small padded sparring gloves. Dillian tossed another red helmet and a pair of gloves onto the mat. "Put them on," he said, while stretching his hamstrings. "Simple rules. Point fighting. Keep moving. We'll throw strikes and pull the power at the last second. You block them. If you spot an opening, throw a light counter. Mostly, just make us work." Akshay picked up the equipment. The inside of the helmet smelled sour, carrying the scent of old pennies and stale breath. He buckled it beneath his chin. The gloves felt bulky and unnatural. In the desert, no one wore padding. You felt bone break beneath your knuckles. "Ready?" Damien asked. Stepping onto the line, he settled into a wide karate stance, hands angled, breathing sharply through his nose. Akshay simply stood there. He didn't assume any formal stance. His feet remained shoulder-width apart as he casually raised his padded hands to chest height. "Fine, I'll take the first 3 minutes," Damien told his brother. The invisible bell rang. Damien exploded into motion. He became a blur of black canvas, closing the distance with a skipping side kick. Akshay's eyes caught the movement of Damien's hips immediately. He recognized the kick long before it arrived, but his mind and body were moving at different speeds. He tried to pivot. His damaged knee locked. Smack. The kick landed squarely against his ribs. Air burst from his lungs in a rough hiss. He stumbled backward, his heel catching the edge of the mat. Damien never slowed. He followed with a lightning-fast 1-2, combination tapping Akshay's headgear twice with sharp, irritating thuds. "Too slow, old man," Damien laughed as he bounced safely back out of range. Akshay coughed, tasting the faint metallic flavor of blood at the back of his throat. His ribs throbbed. Nothing was broken, but the cartilage was definitely bruised. He simply nodded and tapped his gloves together. "Take the money. Just take the money." Damien charged again, this time throwing a high roundhouse kick aimed straight at Akshay's neck. Akshay barely managed to lift his left arm in time. Damien's shin slammed into his forearm, sending a wave of numbness racing all the way to his fingertips. The impact knocked him off balance, and he stumbled backward before crashing hard onto the mat. From the sidelines, Dillian burst into laughter. "Come on, maintenance. At least make him work for it. You're standing there like a statue." Akshay remained seated for a moment. The bright fluorescent lights blurred across his vision. The harsh scent of the industrial cleaner he had just used drifted up from the vinyl floor. His shoulder throbbed with pain, and his ribs burned with every breath. He looked up at Damien, who stood there grinning. It was a smile Akshay recognized immediately. It was the expression of someone who believed violence was a game, a sport protected by rules, referees, and soft landings. Then, something deep inside Akshay quietly shifted. It wasn't anger. Anger was loud, reckless, and uncontrolled. This was something colder, something silent. It was the survival instinct of a man who had fought through narrow adobe alleyways where there were no points to score, only the question of whether you lived long enough to see the next sunrise. Akshay slowly stood. He didn't bounce on his feet. He didn't dust himself off. Instead, he reached up, pulled apart the Velcro straps on the red foam helmet, and tossed it onto the mat. It landed with a dull thud. Damien frowned. "Hey, put the gear back on. It's for insurance." Akshay simply stared at him. The crushing exhaustion that had filled his eyes moments earlier had disappeared, replaced by a calm, chilling focus. He slipped off the padded gloves and dropped them beside the helmet. Then he rolled his neck. The loud, wet crack echoed through the silent gym. "Your distance management is terrible," Akshay said quietly. Damien's grin vanished. His pride flared instantly. "Excuse me?" "You fight like you're scared of the ground," Akshay replied, stepping forward. He wasn't standing in any traditional karate stance. He moved like a predator, flat-footed, balanced, and low to the ground. "Come on," he said calmly. "Make me work for it." Damien narrowed his eyes. "Fine. Tough guy. Your funeral." He exploded forward, unleashing a rapid combination. A textbook reverse punch followed immediately by a spinning back fist. This time, Akshay didn't waste energy trying to retreat. Instead, he stepped directly into the attack. It completely defied everything Damien expected. As the reverse punch shot toward him, Akshay shifted his head barely an inch to the right, allowing the padded glove to brush harmlessly past his ear. In the same instant, he closed the distance. Damien suddenly found himself with no room to move. Before he could complete the spin for the back fist, Akshay's rough, calloused hand clamped tightly onto the thick collar of Damien's custom gi. The grip felt like an industrial vice. Damien gasped. His eyes widened as he instinctively tried to pull away. He couldn't. Akshay didn't perform a clean judo throw. He relied on brutal, practical leverage. Driving his forearm hard beneath Damien's chin, he forced the younger man's head backward, instantly breaking his balance. At the same moment, Akshay swept his heavy work boot behind Damien's ankle. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't elegant. It was a violent chopping motion. Damien's feet lifted completely off the mat. He slammed into the floor with a sickening impact that echoed through the high ceiling. The air burst from his lungs in a painful choke. Akshay didn't step back or wait for an imaginary referee to award points. He dropped heavily into a kneeling position directly onto Damien's chest, driving his knee into the billionaire's ribs and pinning him flat against the mat. His scarred right fist drew back, stopping barely 2 inches from Damien's nose. The gym fell completely silent. The only sounds left were the steady hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and Damien's desperate, wheezing attempts to pull air into his crushed lungs. The only sounds filling the gym were the steady hum of the fluorescent lights and Damien's panicked, wheezing struggle to pull air into his lungs beneath Akshay's crushing weight. Off to the side, Dillian stood frozen, the smug grin completely erased from his face and replaced with genuine shock. Akshay looked down at Damien. He could smell the sandalwood cologne mixing with the sharp scent of fresh fear sweat. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he leaned closer, speaking in a whisper as cold as a rain-soaked gravestone. "In the real world," Akshay murmured, his scarred fist trembling slightly with restrained force, "when your feet leave the ground, you die. Now pay me." Silence settled across the mat, brittle and heavy. Dillian recovered first. The disbelief on his face twisted into something raw and primal. His brother was gasping on the floor, trapped beneath the weight of a man who felt more like a ghost than a janitor. Without warning, Dillian charged. He didn't bow. He didn't announce himself. He hurled a desperate overhand right towards the back of Akshay's head. Akshay caught the blur of black canvas in his peripheral vision. He didn't perform some flawless cinematic counter. He was 38 years old, running on barely 3 hours of sleep, and his right knee felt packed with broken glass. Instead of blocking cleanly, he simply shifted his weight sideways, rolling off Damien's chest. Dillian's fist clipped Akshay's shoulder. It was only a glancing hit, but it still sent a sharp spike of pain racing through his collarbone. Akshay slammed onto the mat with a harsh hiss as the breath left his lungs. His boots squeaked against the tatami as he scrambled for balance. Dillian was already closing in, abandoning every polished, point-fighting stance he had practiced. He fired a front kick straight toward Akshay's ribs. Akshay caught the ankle. The impact bruised his forearm, sending a dull ache through his wrist, but his grip never loosened. He twisted his torso, pulling Dillian's leg across his body while driving his good shoulder directly into the younger man's supporting knee. Crack. No bone broke. The sound came from heavy canvas slamming violently against the floor as Dillian lost his balance and crashed onto the mat. Akshay didn't hesitate. With a strained grunt, he climbed on top of him. He didn't throw a punch. Instead, he drove his forearm across Dillian's throat, shifting his full body weight forward. "You want to play?" Akshay wheezed, spit flying from his lips, his voice shaking with exhaustion and buried fury. "You want to know what it really feels like?" Dillian gagged, clawing helplessly at Akshay's thick forearm. The scent of expensive sandalwood cologne disappeared beneath the harsh metallic smell of Akshay's sweat. Across the mat, Damien had finally managed to sit up. He coughed violently, dragging ragged breaths into his bruised lungs. He looked from his brother to the janitor pinning him down. The polished, mirror-lined walls of Apex Martial Arts reflected a scene that didn't belong inside their luxury gym. It looked less like a sparring session and more like a brutal alleyway fight. It looked like reality. Akshay held the choke for 3 more seconds, just long enough to watch true panic fill Dillian's eyes, just long enough to feel the frantic, bird-like flutter of the billionaire's pulse beneath his arm. Then he released him. Akshay rolled away and collapsed onto his back against the cold vinyl mat. He stared at the relentless fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. His chest rose and fell heavily. His bruised rib throbbed where Damien had kicked him. His shoulder burned with every breath. He squeezed his eyes shut as a crushing wave of dread washed over him. "I just assaulted my employers." The adrenaline drained away, leaving behind nothing but a cold, hollow pit in his stomach. "I'm going to lose this job. I'm going to jail. Chloe. God, Chloe." Forcing himself upright, his joints cracked in protest. He looked over at the twins. Both men were still sitting on the floor, breathing hard, staring at him as though he had climbed out of a grave. Akshay said nothing. He untied the borrowed white belt and let it fall onto the mat. Then he shrugged off the stiff GI jacket, exposing the scars across his back as the cool air brushed against his skin. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet, swaying for a moment before walking over to Dillian's leather duffel bag. He stopped beside it and looked directly at Dillian, who was rubbing his reddened throat. "The $500, Akshay said flatly. There was no pride in his voice, no anger, just a man asking to be paid for his work. Dillian stared in disbelief. You almost broke my brother's neck? And you still want the money?" "You paid for a live target," Akshay replied, his voice grinding like rusty gears. "You paid for a lesson. I gave you one." Akshay looked at both brothers. The absurdity of it all settled into his mind with brutal clarity. He was risking his freedom and his daughter's home for the cash inside that duffel bag. They had only risked their pride. The Grant twins. Akshay. Their stakes were completely different. A bruised ego, a lost sparring session, an eviction notice on Friday, a winter coat for Chloe. Their world chased trophies and polished technique. His world was built on survival and desperation. To them, violence was a scheduled sport. To him, violence was chaotic, painful, and permanent. Damien slowly climbed to his feet. He wasn't angry anymore. He looked deeply, profoundly unsettled. Walking over, he helped Dillian stand. "Pay him, Dom," Damien rasped, his throat still raw. Dillian blinked, shook his head, then reached into the duffel bag. His hands trembled as he removed the money clip. He peeled off 5 crisp $100 bills, clean and carrying the faint scent of leather. He held them out. Akshay accepted the money. The bills felt strangely heavy in his hand. He folded them twice and tucked them deep into the front pocket of his faded cargo pants. He didn't thank them. He didn't celebrate. He simply turned around and walked back toward his mop bucket. Wait. It was Damien. Akshay stopped with one hand resting on the worn wooden mop handle. He didn't turn around. "I still have to finish the north sector," he said quietly. "The floors have to be dry." "Who are you?" Damien asked. Every trace of arrogance had vanished from his voice, replaced by quiet, desperate curiosity. "That wasn't karate. That wasn't MMA. You didn't even watch my hands when I threw my combination." Akshay tightened his grip on the splintered handle. The truth was simple. He was a former ranger who had spent 3 long years in physical therapy just learning to walk again without a cane. The lie was just as easy. He was only a guy who watched too many YouTube videos. He chose neither. "I'm the guy who cleans your floors," Akshay said without turning around. "You watch hands because you're playing a game. You wait for the strike so you can block it and score a point. I watch shoulders and hips. I don't care about the strike. I care about destroying the foundation it comes from." He pushed the mop forward. Pop, drag, ring. "We'll double your salary," Dillian blurted, stepping toward him. Akshay stopped. This time, he glanced over his injured shoulder. "Leave the maintenance crew," Dillian continued, his business instincts overcoming the pain in his bruised throat. "Come work for us. Executive protection, personal training, whatever title you want. We have a tournament." "I don't care about your tournament," Akshay interrupted. The exhaustion in his voice weighed more than the mop bucket itself. "You can't buy what I did to you tonight." Damien frowned. "Everyone has a price. We just gave you $500 for 3 minutes of work." "You paid for groceries," Akshay replied softly. "You can't buy the desperation that taught me how to survive."